Vítam vás pri počúvaní ďalšieho vydania v ženskom rode. Podcast v ženskom rode môžete pravidelne odoberať cez Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts alebo Spotify. Sledovať, komentovať a najmä zdieľať ho ďalším poslucháčom môžete aj na sociálnych sieťach Facebook a Twitter. Teším sa, že ste súčasťou môjho dobrodružstva dávať šancu múdrym ženským myšlienkam, inšpiratívnym príbehom a hlbokým dušiam. Keď som začala s podcastom v ženskom rode, ani mi nenapadlo, že niekedy budem nahrávať aj diely v angličtine. Tým prvým je tento rozhovor s britskou političkou Madeleine Moon, poslankyňou House of Commons a prezidentkou Parlamentného zhromaždenia NATO. Stretli sme sa počas jeho jarného zasadnutia, ktoré sa v uplynulý víkend uskutočnilo v Bratislave. Aj pre mňa to bolo veľmi inšpiratívne a povzbudzujúce stretnutie. V ženskom rode dnes nie len o nádeji a láske, ale aj o aktivizme, starostlivosti o druhých a potrebe odhodlať sa na zmenu, ak sa nám niečo nepáči. This is the first, and hopefully not last, English language episode of my podcast in feminine gender, in which I am introducing clever and inspirational women to my Slovak audience. I wish it makes you, all English-speaking listeners in many other countries, full of hope, courage and motivation too. Before getting into politics, I know that your career was in health and social care. What did you do?
Well, I suppose you come to the nub of who I am really there. Because I worked in child and adult protection. So I worked with vulnerable children who often had difficult lives, which led to them being taken into care by the state. And I dealt with vulnerable adults who were at a time of crisis in their life, sometimes because of health that had changed, sometimes because of tensions and difficulties within families, and sometimes both for the children and the adults in the care of the state, or were being cared for by others because they could no longer be with their families. So it's about protection. My professional life was always around protecting vulnerable people and making sure that you gave them the best opportunities and quality of life that you could. And I suppose that's a driver. That was a driving force and remains a driving force for me. Focusing on the individual. And sometimes the individual can be a collective. It doesn't have to be one individual person. But making life as positive and constructive as possible. And politics gives you a chance to do that on a wider spectrum.
That was going to be my question, like, why did you get into politics? But before that, I suppose you were very active in the local community. And then local politics.
I was involved in politics, I suppose, from my adolescence.
That's interesting.
I have never been passive in the sense of taking whatever comes my way. It was always my view that if you didn't want to be a victim, you had to know and understand what was happening around you. And you had to take responsibility for the changes that you wanted in society. You couldn't sit back and just complain and say, oh, they're useless, and you can't trust them. You had to be them. You had to be making the changes that you wanted. You had to be pushing forward the areas that you thought were being neglected. And I was one of those student demonstrators and working in politics, just on the fringe from a very young age, and wanting to make a difference and making life a positive experience for those that I cared about and the values that I cared about.
That's actually changing the questions I had in mind before. How aware are you of the protests happening in Slovakia within the last year? Because that's what you are saying is actually reminding me of the people and many young people who are doing the same in past months, in past year, who actually were protesting against things in society and politics they didn't like. And they actually became the change themselves. And they motivated us, older ones, I must say. I'm not really a student anymore, unfortunately. To actually do something, as you said, not to be passive. If you want a change, if you want to change things you don't like, you need to do something about it.
Yes, you can't sit back. It drives me crazy when people make sweeping statements like, oh, you can't trust the politicians. They're all on the take. They're all in it for themselves. No, they are not. And if you really think they are, what are you going to do about it? Because if you're sitting back and just dismissing it, then you are culpable. You are failing your family, you're failing your country, you're failing the people that you work with, your profession. If you're passively just saying, they're all corrupt, they're all useless, well, do something about it. And I have never been very good at sitting back and blaming other people. If you want changes, you take responsibility for it. Now, people do have power, and democracy gives people power. You know, if you live in a dictatorship, or you live in a society where the secret police will crack down on you and knock on the door at 3 a.m. and take the members of your family away because you've said things that are inappropriate, I can understand people's nervousness. But if you're living in a democracy, you have no excuse. You have no excuse for not stepping up and saying, this is what I believe in, and these are the things that we need for society, and becoming active in achieving that. Now, that can be, it doesn't have to be about politics. Mm-hmm. It can be around improved quality of services for people with mental health, with learning disabilities. It can be around environmental activism. It can be around improving farming practices, whatever it is that's your passion and your area of deep concern, then be the change you want to see and push for that. Otherwise, you're just a passive recipient and you have no right to complain.
Every single sentence you say could be a title of this podcast. Really, it is indeed something which really democracy gives people power and voice. That's a thing we probably do not think about when we shop, for groceries or
you see, that's what people think.
Yeah,
that's what they think. They think the power they've got is financial. Mm-hmm. No, the finance is lovely. Please don't get me wrong. I love shopping. I'm a very happy shopper. But that's the small stuff. When you leave this life, if you haven't left it in a better place, then what have you done with your time? If you've spent your time watching the television and sitting on the sofa and not changing things, well, you've wasted a bit of an opportunity. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be making sure the hugeness is around the quality of life and the examples you set for your children. It can be the way you have set an example for your neighborhood, but you don't just be a taker, and you don't sit back and allow that it's everybody else's responsibility to make the world the way you want it to be, because that's how you lose the world. That passivity and the followship of people who say things that it's easy and complacent to just think, yeah, I agree with that. And they're nearly always negatives. It's always about they're doing this wrong and they're responsible for the unhappiness of your life. No, if you're unhappy in your life, then you have a responsibility for that. And you have a responsibility to look at why you're unhappy in your life. And it can't just be because nobody's given me what I want, because only you give you what you want.
It reminds me of, that we have a new president-elect for the first time in history. Slovakia is going to have soon, in 2 weeks actually, more than that, a little bit more than that, first female president.
I know. And a very impressive female president.
Oh, she is. She is indeed. And Zuzana Čaputová, when she was actually still in campaign, she has 2 daughters. And I've heard and I've listened to and read some comments, and some were actually coming from other women, saying, like, what kind of example is she giving to her daughters, that she should be staying home and taking care of her children and not actually, trying to get into politics and try to be, too much of something that her role should be somewhere else. And I actually thought that she is setting a perfect example for her daughters.
Absolutely.
That doing something about things I don't like or I want to do differently is the perfect kind of example for our children. Would you agree with that?
I would, because if you say to me, where does this passion come from? I would say my mother. My mother taught me, if you don't like it, do something about it. Now, my mother didn't work. My mother was a full-time housewife who also cared for her mother. So all of my life, my mother cared for her children, but also for her mother. Because my grandmother lived well into her 90s, at a time when people didn't live into their 90s. Yeah. And my mother would travel every day to make sure my grandmother was looked after and was well fed and the home was good, and to look after her brother, who was not well and who lived with my grandmother. But she set me the example that you have wider responsibilities than your personal happiness, and that your personal happiness can be around caring for others around you and being active. Now, passivity is not an example to give to your children, because life is tough. As you say, shit happens. And
very British, thank you. Thank you for this.
Sorry, I don't know how that comes over in terms of...
No, perfectly.
But it's not that it happens to you, it's how you deal with it. And the fact that you have to see it as the challenge in your life to deal with it in a way that gives you strength to carry on. And that is good for those around you, because there will be people that will come to you who will protect you when it happens and who will be there for you. But ultimately, you have to deal with it yourself. And you cannot expect that life is always going to be easy and good. And you have to prepare your children for that. And one of the things that worries me is that I see young parents today building their life around their children and wanting to constantly protect their children from the tough things in life.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that.
Now,
I see it.
I'm not saying that you have to make life harsh for your children, but people have to understand, and children have to understand that at times life will be tough. There will be things that will knock you back. There will be things that cause you great pain. There will be failures. There will be times when you doubt yourself. There will be times when you will be betrayed by those that you thought you could trust. And you have to keep going. And if your life isn't built around that and that knowledge, then it makes you weaker. And that's not good for you. And it's not good for those that you live your life alongside, because you can't always have people there to catch you. You have to catch yourself. And you have to be willing and able to catch yourself. And that extends across societies. Because if you're going to fall as a society, you're going to look for a strong man, and it nearly always is a strong man, who will say to you, follow me and I will make life comfortable for you. And let me tell you, that's a trap. That's a big trap. Because anybody who offers you that, they're offering it so that they can rip you off.
It's a very good metaphor.
There are people who you can look to for leadership and inspiration. But even when you find people that you think, wow, they're pretty stunning, that doesn't take away your responsibility to think and to check. Do I
Verify,
agree with that?
yeah. Exactly. You are yourself now in a leadership role.
Yes.
You actually, if I have to jump from your life in local politics and then through politics and on the global platform, you are president of the Parliamentary NATO Assembly at present. Let me just ask, maybe I know something about it myself, but there are many listeners who may not know what actually Parliamentary NATO Assembly is. And as I said earlier, I don't want to ask deeply specific political questions, but how come that you, a woman, I think that it's pretty straightforward to think that, NATO, military, soldiers, men. How come that a woman has this role, and how you feel in this role as a woman?
Okay, how come I had the role? Well, it's an election. It's a democracy, and I was very fortunate in that I had people who believed in me and who trusted in me. Why did I want the role? Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose I wanted the role for, as always, nothing is ever, I believed I had the leadership capability and all that nonsense. There were lots of things. First of all, my country is in a mess. An absolute pig's breakfast of a mess. And the one thing I wanted to do was to go into a forum of Europeans and say, we're still here. not only are we still here, we're not going anywhere. And we're in a mess, but believe me, we'll be back. And from the mess, but in the meantime, in terms of NATO, trust us, we're here. So I wanted to make that absolutely clear, that in terms of relying on my country, in terms of its capacity and its willingness to put its armed forces and its political power towards the democracy of Europe, we weren't going anywhere. So I really felt it important that Britain was there saying that. But I also have been deeply concerned that we have underplayed and been too low-key about what NATO is and what the Parliamentary Assembly is. Excuse me, I'm getting really emotional about this because I believe very passionately in this. So we have sat back for too long and let people see the alliance and the values that the alliance espouses around democracy and the rule of law and using our collective economic strengths to strengthen each other and to build secure and stable societies in which people could trust that they controlled their armed forces, that they weren't going to live in dictatorships, that the rule of law and justice and the removal of corruption and the removal of political corruption was going to be the world that they lived in. And we've forgotten to remind people about that.
Exactly. And I think that that's why they believe in such nonsense and all those hoaxes and all those
and the fake news
and fake news. Exactly.
Because it's easy. It's so easy to believe the lies. So I wanted to also take on the role to raise the profile and to raise awareness, and in particular to raise awareness amongst women.
I think that
and children and young people.
Yeah. And how are you going to do that?
Well, so for example, I believe in talking to young people. So here I'm going to talk to a group of young people at the university, and they can ask me whatever they want, just like you can, you know. I am what I am. You just ask me, and I don't always know the right answer, but I'll give you as good as I can, and I can find the person who knows the technical stuff for you. Yep. And I'm holding a meeting of the women parliamentarians to talk about how, as women, because women in defence and security, they're a rare breed.
Very rare, I would say.
Very rare.
And people get sometimes suspicious of those women, very rare women, you know, because it's so unusual to see that there's this military man and all these armed forces, and then you can see a couple of women and you just get suspicious, like, what is she doing there? You know, oh, she must be some kind of a weird person to be there.
You are a bit of a weird person to be there, in fairness. How did I get there? So my background, health and social care. My husband was an ecologist. And my name is Moon. So the image is hippy drippy.
Sorry, I must laugh. Sorry.
And one day I walked into the chamber of the House of Commons.
Which is the UK Parliament,
yes.
We must say.
And there were a group of middle-aged white men talking to a group of middle-aged white men about war in Afghanistan. And I thought, what? Where's the women? Because let me tell you, in war, the victims of war are not the soldiers. The victims in war are the women and the children, the elderly, the people who are defenceless.
Exactly.
They can do nothing.
Who cannot run.
No. They haven't got the guns. They're not the ones carrying out the mass slaughters. So if you're going to protect the civilians, you want to be part of building the armed forces and the values in those armed forces, and in making sure that the leadership of those armed forces is aware of its responsibilities. Now, NATO does that, but you always have to be in there making sure that they're operating with those values and have the capabilities to provide that protection. Because, let me tell you, the enemy isn't going to do that for you. The enemy isn't going to be saying to its personnel and to its generals, protect the civilians. Just spend one day reading the news reports of what's been happening in Syria, and you will see the targeting of civilians.
Exactly, but not only from the Syrian forces, I must say.
So, where we get it wrong, it's the politicians who have to go in there and say, if we got that wrong, why? Was it a mistake? Is it our rules of operation?
Neglect.
Was it faulty equipment? Do you not have what we need? And let me tell you, politically, it's not just women not engaging in it. How many politicians in today's political climate have any understanding of defence? There are 650 MPs in the UK. And I know all of the ones who are defence-minded. And if I really extend and I push the boundaries to find even the widest inkling, the least little inkling of defence, I would say I'd be pushing it to find 50. Really understand or have any grasp.
Well, I wonder how many would be in our parliament, actually.
Yeah. So it is frightening how much we have neglected defence. Because if you're a politician, you want to give the voter what they want. And what the voters want is improved, and it's the things that they interact with every day, because they don't interact with the armed forces.
Yeah.
They interact with the availability of food. They interact with the quality of health and education services. They interact with the quality of the care services. They interact with their wages. They interact with the benefits and support systems when things go wrong in their lives. They don't interact with our armed forces. And yet we, all of us, every politician will tell you their first responsibility is the security and stability of the state.
Yeah, well, because once that fails, everything else will be useless. Sorry for saying that.
Yes.
Because once you are in war,
It's gone.
it's gone. Everything else is absolutely unimportant, because then you will be at war and your country will be defenseless.
But also, people are afraid of the military. Not afraid of it because of their guns, but because they don't know what the gun is called. So people don't go near the military in parliamentary terms because they don't know the uniforms and they can't tell the difference between the Air Force, the Navy and the Army. They don't understand what's the difference between an F-35 and an F-16, which are airplanes. So they're worried about using the wrong words about the kit and the equipment and who has what level of responsibility. Are they a sergeant? Are they a corporal? What are they?
It's easier to comment on football match or an ice hockey match,
but if
rather than to comment on military.
So if you are interested in health, you're not expected to know the name of all the different scanners or the different scalpels that are used in an operation. Now, people think, oh, I can't do defence because I don't know
much,
the technical terms. I don't know whether I'm supposed to salute people. Well, that's no excuse for not understanding the decisions. And in my lifetime in Parliament, the toughest decisions I've had to make have been around whether or not we commit our personnel to take military action. And people have asked me, and if you want to have tough interviews, let me tell you, the toughest interviews on God's planet are a classroom of 10 and 11-year-olds.
Why?
Because they don't know what's a nice question. They just want to know. So
They're curious.
They throw it at you.
Okay.
You know? And I love them. I love, because this is the chance to get the next generation to know that a politician's like them. That, you know, you're not born as a politician. You evolve as a politician. And that leadership is about something they can aspire to, whether it is the leadership of the local scout group, on the committee of the gardening club, or whatever, you know. They have to know they have responsibilities and can take on roles of leadership. But that also you have to be honest and frank about the difficulties along the road. And they will ask me things like, do you think you've ever got something wrong?
Do you?
I still don't know about Libya. I voted yes, that we would take action because I believed that Gaddafi would kill and that he would systematically go into areas and kill every man, woman and child. So I gave my vote to say yes. But I see where Libya is now. And I don't know. I don't know. I said I thought the Prime Minister in the UK needed to take more time and to come back with more information for us and to give time for the chemical weapons experts to give us more information about taking action after chemical attacks in Syria. Now, David Cameron, the Prime Minister in the UK, decided, well, in that case, we're not going to do it at all. And he, as we say in the UK, he took his ball home and said, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to come back. We're just not going to do it. I'm not going to come back and do as you ask and give you more information. I'm just going to say we're not going to do it. And that had consequences. And your actions have consequences and you have to live with that fact. And that's not always easy when it comes to involving military personnel. But I would rather go into that chamber before making my vote fully informed and fully aware of the consequences of my actions and the decisions that I make than listen to what the whips, the parliamentary management team tell you that the leader of your party says you should do. I am not there to represent the views of the leader of my party. I'm there to represent the views of the people who elect me. Now, they elect me on my party, and as far as possible, I will work with my party. But when it comes to war, then I need to know. I have to live with that judgment. So I have to have the knowledge and the capability of assessing the data that I'm shown to make the right decision.
Well, the knowledge is the key, isn't it?
Yes.
The knowledge is, it gives you tremendous opportunities and responsibilities at the same time. I'm just looking at you and thinking about our president. She's going to be the head of our armed forces.
Yes.
And it's very unusual position for a woman, as we discussed. I see many women around me, definitely my mother, are very responsible, and I see many women as, judging and thinking and rethinking 100 times before making a decision, because we somehow understand, maybe it's because of the motherhood, that every single decision we make is going to have an impact.
It will have consequences.
An impact on others, and on life of others, individuals and families. And that's a big burden in a way. It's very
My
difficult.
son, bless him, difficult childhood because he had me as his mother, grew up with me saying, you have to think of the consequences of your actions. And we all do have to do that. And most of the time we breeze through life not thinking about the consequences of our actions. And that's fine, because you have unconsciously made risk assessments. So one of the first things as a mother you do is you teach your child how to safely cross a road, how to make the risk assessments. And in split seconds you get to a curb and you look both ways and you're making assessments of the speed of the vehicles. Do I have control of the road? Is there a zebra crossing? Are the traffic lights green or are the traffic lights red?
Shall I stop or go? Yeah.
So we think we're just walking across the road, but no, we're carrying out risk assessments. And eventually we can do it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be aware that in everything you're doing, you're making a risk assessment. And that doesn't remove from you the responsibility to check it. Because one of these days you will possibly step off that curb. And for me, I live in terror of this because I travel so much. Sometimes I get back to the UK and I'm having to now remember which way the traffic's coming from. You're back in the UK.
I can imagine that. It's coming the other way. Hello.
and it just makes me laugh sometimes. Like, woof. And especially when you're tired.
Yeah.
So you have to sometimes double check your risk assessments. And in politics, you're making those risk assessments for lots of people. I don't meet many politicians who don't take that responsibility very seriously. And I know it's very easy to be cynical about politicians and they're all in it for themselves. And it's a trope. It's easy. It's lazy thinking. Because if they are like that, use your blinking vote and find a better candidate for you. And going back to your president, you're asking her to do that on your behalf. And you're trusting her to have the integrity and the personal integrity to take that responsibility very seriously. And from what I read about her, she will be that person for you. But that doesn't mean that you can say, it's her fault if she got it wrong. If she gets it wrong, or you think she's getting it wrong, then she has an email address. Then you have your local member of parliament and you go to them and say, I'm deeply worried about this. I'd like to know more. Why is that direction being taken? Can I know more, please? So that you're informed and you can also express your concerns based on facts and information and not on the basis of what somebody said on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media.
Exactly, this is what I wanted to say, that when once you actually have to, write an email or get in touch with someone directly, it's so much more than clicking
It certainly
something
is.
on Facebook. It's so much more requiring of you, the energy and activity and questioning, asking questions. I think that, the laziness we produce every day by just automatic clicking and refreshing the Facebook button.
It's very lazy. But
yeah.
also what you're doing is you're giving yourself away. You are absolutely, and people don't understand that every time you like and retweet or like and forward and share, for people who want to target you, you're building up your profile. So if somebody's going to send you fake information and disinformation and use you, well, they have got a lovely profile that tells them how to reach you and what are the ways to get to you. Because they're certainly not going to say, here I am, I'm an agent of disinformation who wants to destabilize your society. This is the information I think you need to know. They're going to pretend to be someone like you with your interests in life and cloak the information in messages around football or gardening or cake making or whatever it is that you've demonstrated you have a big interest in. So you have, and sorry, I'm getting boring on this, but you have a personal responsibility to be awake and aware. And to be suspicious, because we're deeply suspicious about mainstream media, but we're incredibly naive on the internet.
It's very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Yeah. I think that people sometimes just think that sharing on social media is actually the activism they should
I know.
demonstrate.
I see them coming in into my inbox in Westminster. I can sit there and I can just see them all dropping in, and it's 500 of the same letter that they've taken from an internet site that says, write to your MP and tell me you're unhappy about this. And they send me 500 identical letters as to, telling me I should be doing X instead of Y. And I good, thank you. That's great. Because I send them back very detailed information about why I'm going to be doing what I'm doing, giving examples and sending them to more information. Have a look at this. This was a speech that was made by somebody that brings in this perspective. Have a look at that. Because my role is to make them think that it's not as simple as they were told when they picked up
what they did.
What they did. Now, not everybody likes that. And some people will come back and say, well, actually, that was great. Thank you. I didn't understand all of that. Thank you. That was really helpful.
You actually catched a part of them.
But some people will say, oh, you're just trying to bamboozle me with all this information, but I still think that you should do this. So you go back to them again and say, look, I understand that your perspective says this, but my job is to look at it wider in terms of what's best for my constituents, what's best for, because I'm a Welsh MP, so I have a Welsh perspective, and to look at the United Kingdom as a whole. And my judgment is that this is the right step to go. So you're not going to please everybody, but hey, that's life. It's not just politics, it's life.
And politics shouldn't be about pleasing, as you said at the beginning.
No. But that's like being a mother. Yeah, it's not about pleasing your children.
Oh, yes. I have 3 boys, yes. God save me. Thank you very much for everything. And I have 3 more personal questions at the end.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give to yourself when you were 17?
17? Oh. Golly gosh. I'd like to go back earlier and tell myself not to give up on learning to play the piano.
Thank you for saying that. And I hope my children will listen to this, because one of them was considering giving a piano.
I really wish I could play a musical instrument. I really, really desperately would like to be able to do that. And I'm not artistically, I love the arts and I love music, but my capability is 0. And it's the big gap in my life. So I'd like to do more about that. I would want to do more about being physically active. I don't get enough physical activity, and I tell you, that's a real problem in politicians' lives, because you go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and you get home and you are drained and exhausted and you can't sleep because basically you haven't had any exercise, you haven't had any fresh air. All you've done is used your brain all day. Mm-hmm. And I know I ought to go and put on an outfit and go for a 5-mile run, and I don't. And I wish I'd built that into my life very young, much younger. And I wish I had a stronger memory, because you have to absorb so much information as a politician, and you have to dredge stuff up from the back of your mind about, I had a briefing on that, and you have to get it back so quick that at 17 I wish I'd done more about training my memory to pull things out of the filing cabinets in my brain faster.
Okay. Sorry that I'm not 17, because I would have to do the same then. What was the best advice you got?
At 17?
Let's say. When you were young, whatever. If you can think of anything which really resonated through your life based on that advice.
Again, I'd take it back to what I said about my mother, which is your responsibilities. And that you don't walk away. Do not walk away. There are things that you won't like. There are things that will be too difficult, whether it's too difficult to understand or too difficult to commit yourself to do, or it's too difficult in terms of it's messy and uncomfortable. But if you walk away, you're not just betraying the people you walk away from, you're betraying yourself. So you don't walk away.
And the last, based on one sentence you said, what gives you strength to carry on?
The people I surround myself with. So I have, and actually they're all women, I have a group of women who are not engaged, most of them in politics, who have been my friends. Actually, if I think about them, once since school days, once since my student days, one since my working in health and social care. Mm-hmm. And once I became a mum, and we learned about being mums together. And they keep me grounded. Because in politics, you have to stay true and honest. Now, that isn't what people think it is. They think it's around, bribery and corruption. But it can be about pleasing people. And that's much more dangerous. And for me, I know I have to go back to my friendship group and to people in my community that I highly respect and look them in the face. And I never want to have to go back and be ashamed of my actions. And that's the most important thing in life. Never be ashamed of what you've done. Always be able to look people in the eye and say, I know it isn't what you'd have approved of. And I know it isn't what you wanted me to do. But I honestly believe it was the right decision. And if I'm wrong, I'll have to live with it. But trust me, I did the full assessment. I did the full risk analysis. And I used my judgment. And that's what you're buying from politicians. You're buying their judgment.
Ďakujem, že ste počúvali môj podcast v ženskom rode. Ak vás tento rozhovor zaujal, vypočujte si aj tie ostatné. V ženskom rode môžete sledovať a zdieľať aj na Facebooku. Napíšte mi svoje názory, nápady a hodnotenie. Už o týždeň v stredu sa na vás teším s novým dielom.